Welcome back to Your Voice, Your Future. I'm your moderator, Armstrong Williams. Rob Bluey, Vice President, Communications and Executive Editor at the Daily Signal, joins us again. Tiffany and Lloyd, welcome back, Ph.D., Political Science, and Professor and radio host. We welcome her back. I haven't seen you in a while. And Juan Villasmil, an ISI Journalist Fellow, Editorial Assistant at the Spectator World, a Young Voices contributor. You know, let me raise this. You know, we've just come out of the holiest of weeks in this country, the Easter weekend, and it's fascinating. There's a record number of young people who commit suicide. They find themselves depressed. Some of them think having faith and believing in God and being religious is sort of fantastical. But, you know, I'm just really, and I'm going to start with you, JP. What is it, what are the values of young people today? What is it that they value? What is it that they cherish? What is it that influences them more than anything else?
I think the question of what my generation values is not that distinct from what other generations value. We value connection. We're humans, after all. We do value family, we do value country, we do value being part of something bigger than ourselves. The issue is that that's increasingly difficult for us to find.
Let me ask you this, what is bigger than yourself to be a part of? What is bigger than you?
Well, for people that are Christian, the answer is really simple, God, Jesus. But even if you're not Christian, you know, a cause bigger than itself, something that you know, gives you the energy to wake up in the mornings. And what I think is happening, if I'm sincere, is that we're under this facade of infinite interconnection with social media, and a lot of my peers think that they are finding community, but they're truly just finding weak community. You know, that's what you find on Instagram and Twitter. We do need traditional community, and if you don't find that at church and at the parks and at school, I don't know where you can find it, really.
Tiffany, you're a professor. You interact with a lot of students today. They seem to be disenchanted with the presidential candidates. They seem to fight for the underdog, whether it's rooting for Hamas because they think that Israel is the big bad wolf, or they, I mean, we just heard over the weekend for Mayor Brandon Scott. He was referred to as the DIEI mayor, and he says he knows that these so-called bigots and racists really want to call him the N-word, which is so strange when you look at him. He's under 40. He's elected to one of the most prestigious positions in the world, but yet he still feels this way. Whatever he was saying, he was expressing a certain insecurity about no matter what you may achieve, it's still not good enough for some people. Ooh, I'm not hearing her.
Hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I think that no matter what's going on in this world, no matter how much good you put out, there's going to always be individuals that's going to always find something negative to say. And that's why whatever you do, you shouldn't do it for the approval of men, right? You should do it knowing that this is what your calling is. This is what your purpose is. Because if you are always worrying about what someone says about you, it's going to do nothing but just draw you backwards. If we all think about it in our life, we have all been talked about. And I tell people all the time, if you've never been talked about, if you've never been ridiculed, if you've never been misunderstood, if you've never been lied on, just keep living because it will eventually happen to you. I think sometimes we focus on, the statement that he said, it is true, that there will be some people that may not like you based on who you are, the color of your skin. But I think that we cannot lose focus of the major task at hand, of what we have before us, of getting the job done and serving the people.
You know, Rob, it does seem as though we give so much credit to what social media thinks about us. Everybody wants to be liked. And I think Tiffany makes an excellent point. You got to be secure in the fact that, that you have value and you cannot, and this is what they want you to do on social media. They want you talking about them. They want to be the topic of conversation.
Oh, it's a completely different environment from the one you and I grew up in, Armstrong, and I think that's why you're seeing some states take action where they're now putting an age limit and when children are allowed to join social media, Florida being a notable example of that, because I think they're generally worried about the state of the youth mental health and the crisis that you referred to earlier, and the fact that so many people are taking drastic measures in their own lives, suicide being one example of that. And so I do think when it comes to social media, this is where parents need to have the responsibility to police it with their own children. We certainly in our family have rules regarding that. We have a teenager now, and so that's a big factor in a lot of the discussions my wife and I have about him. But I think more broadly, what you see is, yes, it's so quick to get that instant gratification, whether it's on Instagram, posting a photo of yourself and seeing who's liking it, seeing who's commenting, that it's very addictive. And then these platforms themselves, as we've known from whistleblowers who've come out, have said the algorithm is in fact designed that way because they want to keep that hit coming day after day, hour after hour, and that's why people spend so much time browsing these social media apps. It's scary.
You know, it's fascinating, Tiffany, that the state of Florida is passing one of the strictest abortion laws in the country, but yet they're also putting that law on the ballot for the people of the state to decide in the November election.
Yeah, you know, I guess that their mindset is we the people, right? We have a democracy. We have the right to vote people in. We have the right to vote people out. We have the power to vote on policies that we want, and we have the policies not to vote. I think it's going to be very interesting of what the outcome may be, because sometimes what we think how a vote may go in one direction, it could totally go another way. So that's going to be very interesting to see how Florida votes in regard to that matter.
Tiffany, how does your generation feel about what is perceived as the invasion on the border, the southern border, the crisis in immigration, all across the board? No matter what poll you read, immigration is the most important issue.
Yeah. Every single poll seems to reflect that it's top issue. And I think my generation is not immune from this reality. We see what's happening in the southern border, and I don't know if I can speak for everyone in my age group, but it's not a very nice image. The thousands of people crossing the border in a disorganized way, even among my friends that are somewhat liberal, and I have many friends that are liberal, they're not excited about what's happening in the border. And I think it's an issue that it's initially, 5 years ago, if I talked to some of my peers about immigration, they, human rights, oh my God, Trump's using this language. But now most of my friends, when they talk about immigration, they're like, hey, we gotta do something. This is uncontrollable. We're gonna lose our country. And I've seen some of my friends who previously, used to have a more sympathetic and soft language, talk more like Trump. And I'm like, oh, something's happening. Something's happening in this country.
Polls are showing that the president is losing that voter demographic.
Yes, he is. Yeah. And Trump has certainly made significant gains in some of the key states with Hispanic voters, and you're even seeing with black men in particular who are gravitating more toward Trump. And I think that there's a couple of factors. Number one, yes, immigration is obviously front and center because we're seeing the images on a daily basis. But if you look at the pocketbook issues, the cost of gas, groceries, and rent continues to be significantly higher today because of what we endured under the first 3 years of the Biden administration. And that we're still feeling the effects of that. And people who are living paycheck to paycheck might look back on the 4 years of Donald Trump and say, my goodness, my finances were in much better shape. My personal finances were in much better shape under Trump than they are under Biden. And so I think that that's a big factor in some of their decision making as well.
Tiffany, do you think there's a difference in the minds of the American people giving funding to Israel in support of its war against Hamas versus giving more money to Ukraine in its battle against Russia?
Yes, but I do want to say something previous to what I've said, and I can't let it pass. I keep hearing people talk about these polls with Trump and with Biden and talking about black men What evidence do you have with that? Because we keep hearing that. There are so many different polls that are out there. There are some polls that are saying that Trump is leading in some areas, and there are some polls that are saying that Biden is leading. I think for those individuals that say that my paycheck was heavier or things were better under Trump, I don't understand where would you get that from? What evidence do you have to prove that? Now, as we're talking about war, this is what I will say, especially when my students are talking about with the war is concerned. I think that there are so many issues that are going on in America right now that we could be taking care of, as opposed to sending millions of dollars to fund a war. You know, we raised the question, should the U.S. be involved in so many wars? And I think that we have to take care of home first, because there's so many issues that can be taken care of in the United States, as opposed to we're worrying about, not say that we're worrying about, but there's so many needs here in America that we should take care of America first.
JP, let me come back to you. Why do you think so many young people empathize and sympathize so much with Hamas?
This might be a little too complicated to explain, but I think that in a way there's a domestic theory that has been imported to international relations. And this is, of course, I don't like to use the term because people use it so much, but, critical race theory. The idea that the darker you are, the more oppressed you are, and the lighter you are, the less oppressed you are. Often presented in a very simplistic way. I think some of my peers look at Middle Eastern dynamics, and I'm not saying all of them do. Some know a lot, and they still take the Palestinian side. But a lot of my peers, they just look at Hamas, and they say, hey, they're being oppressed by the Jews, because in American politics, the Jews are lighter skinned and they're not brown. And I'm not saying this is all, but this is certainly something that I see, because I see it in other countries. I've seen it in Latin America, for instance. Me growing up as a Hispanic American, sometimes I'll talk about Venezuelan politics, and people will be like, oh, but like you're white. And I'm like, if you're going to talk about Venezuelan politics, like 50% of the country's white and 90% of the population is poor. So there's like other things going in there. But the racial thinking in America, when it's exported to international relations, it tends to have this effect in which people are more sympathetic, siding with traditional enemies of the American government.
I want to have Tiffany respond to his response. Tiffany?
Number one, what does critical race theory have to do with anything? Number one, because oftentimes everybody that keeps using this term critical race theory, you don't even know what the meaning of critical race theory is. You're just going by a narrative of what you've heard someone say. Critical race theory was a law school course, ladies and gentlemen, a law school course. There's no way you can teach critical race theory in schools. These teachers are not qualified to teach critical race theory. So for the love of God, could we please get some understanding of what critical race theory is when people use that word very freely about critical race theory? Number two.
Hold that point, Tiffany. Tiffany, just hold. Let me take a break, because Aideen, for some reason, is not in my ear tonight, and I'm so lost in this conversation, I lost track of time. So let me take a break on Your Voice, Your Future, and we'll be back. Don't go away. Bluey, Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida, who's dealing with Trump's classified documents, is showing that she's more receptive to his claims. signaling it to the prosecution.
Yeah, I mean, this is the case that everyone thought was the most damaging potentially to Trump and his reputation, because obviously it doesn't look great. Now, Trump and his team would argue that this is no different from what Biden did, what previous presidents did. He's allowed to take the documents that he sees fit. Right, I know you're shaking your head, but I'm
not to you though.
I'm just saying, like, this is his counter argument. I ultimately think that the way that these cases have been playing out, I don't know that ultimately anyone's going to make their final decision when they're in the ballot box based on any one of these decisions. Now, it does have the effect of damaging his reputation if he's held guilty.
Can it be damaged anymore?
I don't know. I don't know. If
I don't know.
A judge and a jury, decide.
I don't know. But you mentioned that. Tiffany, what about the Georgia case? Ms. Fani Willis has indicated the case is moving forward. But moving forward, where? What does that mean in terms of the delays that we've had? And now she's saying it's moving forward. Will it move forward before and they come to some kind of verdict before the November elections?
I don't know. If it gets pushed back, then obviously no. So, that was a very interesting case of trying to get Fani Willis removed from a case because of her affair with Nathan Wade. There's no law in Georgia that prohibits that. But given the fact that Fani Willis is still on the case, we shall see. It's going to be very interesting. I think if they can expedite it, they will. And if not, we'll have to wait till after the election. You
don't think Fani getting busy at night with her employee did not compromise? In the tone that it set for the rest of it all. Come on now.
What I said.
I understand legal. I'm talking about morality here.
What I said was there's nothing illegal, and that was very clear. No,
okay,
I didn't say that it was right.
All right.
I didn't say that it was right. So I think that anytime you start having a romantic relationship, of course it's going to compromise. Emotions, feelings get involved. So I think that I think that it was a smart move for her to engage in a romantic relationship with the special prosecutor? Absolutely not.
Okay.
But the law says it's not illegal. But is it right morally? Absolutely not.
Okay, fair enough. So listen, JP, poll after poll consistently shows that President Biden is losing support among Democrats, with many stating unequivocally they're going to vote for somebody else. Granted, of course, it's early. But should this be a concern for Democrats and President Biden?
Of course. President Biden has a very tough problem in which it's really difficult to tell whether he should be appealing more to that progressive faction within his party or to the moderates. It seems like the orthodoxy today is that he should be trying to appeal to this very strong progressive faction. And this is exactly what he's trying to do, especially when it comes to international relations at this moment. But some other Democratic strategists fear that by doing this, he might lose some of the more moderate Democrats that he successfully attained, and thanks to them, he won that election. So it's hard. It's hard to tell. Like, what should Biden do?
Well, listen, why is Biden's approval number so low, and what does it tell us about the state of this presidential race?
Sure. I think that there's just the personal image and the projection he has. I mean, you could ask Republicans, Democrats, Independents. They all say he's too old, right?
Who's too old? Biden or Trump?
Biden's too old. Okay. I mean, just they look at him, they see him at the Easter egg roll today or wherever, and they all of a sudden say, this man does not look like he's capable of making the tough decisions that are required by the president. I think that's fundamentally what the overall image is. I think secondarily, I'll go back and I'll disagree with Tiffany on this. I do think if you look at the cost of groceries, if you look at the cost of rent, if you look at all of those, the cost, I mean, young people can't buy a home today because, it's so expensive. Those are all things that can be directly attributed to the spending spree that Joe Biden and congressional Democrats instituted on their own. So yes, that is a very real tangible difference between the 4 years of Trump and what Americans have experienced. And I think it's probably one of the reasons it's dragging down Biden's poll numbers.
You know, Tiffany, can we really learn anything so early on, and how likely is it that polls will change in Biden's favor?
Anything can happen, right? Anything can happen. A lot of people didn't think that Donald Trump would ever be the president, but he did. Anything can happen. You know, and yeah, okay, you may say that people could buy more groceries under Trump, but I ain't seen so much unrest with Trump. With Biden, this nation was in chaos under Trump's administration. You clearly don't see that with Biden. And you also see more professionalism with the Biden team as well. I'm not saying that Biden does everything right, because let's be clear, Biden has done some things. He has the first female vice president of the United States. He has appointed the first African-American female Supreme Court justice, the student debt relief. He established the Office of Gun Violence. But let's be clear, he has also failed the Black community in many ways. And he rode the bandwagon of the death of George Floyd. He failed to get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed, and then he went on to propose to put hundreds of thousands new cops on the street and to spend billions of dollars doing it without additional accountability measures. They were able to get legislation for the LGBTQ plus community. They were able to get legislation for the Jewish community, for Asian Americans, for Pacific Islanders, but nothing specific for African Americans. So while he may have done some things right, he has also failed, particularly the African American community, on promises that he did not keep.
You know, listen, so Biden is hemorrhaging support among Black voters. But I'm just curiously, does that actually mean that those votes will go to Trump? And what does Trump have to do to appeal to Black voters on substance? And go ahead.
Okay, I need to answer this.
Wait. Let me get JP. Let me get JP's thoughts on that. Go ahead, JP.
But how can anybody say what they can do for Black voters that is not in the Black community? Hello?
Easily. That's why they like leaders to represent their interests. Because there's no such thing to me as black and white issues. Everybody cares about crime. They care about education. They care about immigration. They care about inflation. What are you talking about? Those are issues that affect everybody. Those are not black and white issues. Of course not.
Okay. Of course so.
Go ahead, JP.
To answer the question, I'm not black, but if
How do you know you're not?
If I were black, I think that I would probably want to have.
But you're not black, so don't say what black
I would probably want to
live
live in safer communities and have access to cheaper goods.
Anybody wants to live in safer communities.
You know,
it's quite obvious.
That's not a black and white issue.
So yeah, I think that what Trump could do is honestly just do what he's doing. What we've seen is that. I can speak for Hispanics, right? I can speak for Hispanics. With Hispanics, right? With Hispanics, Trump is doing tremendously well without any need to like try to appeal to us. Like he's not, he appeals in a really funny way. He posted this video like, votar por Donald Trump, and you know, these songs and stuff.
Oh, man.
He doesn't really need to go out there and like try to speak Espanol or, I don't know, try to talk to Hispanics in a very specific tone. He just talks about the issues, and the issues that affect most Americans end up affecting Americans within individual racial groups. So I think actually Trump should refrain from trying to like hyperfixate on demographics, because that's exactly what I think people within those communities don't want. That's exactly what they don't like about Joe Biden.
Because you're not in our community.
Why would he need to be in the community if the issues affect everybody the same? Why?
You know, because until you have walked in our shoes, how can you understand how we feel?
You think poverty is different based on the color of your skin? You think crime is different? You think inflation is different? You think immigration? You gotta be kidding me.
No, there you
this
go.
has nothing to do with no race.
Have you not heard me say all the things that Biden has done to not only fail black people but to fail America? Okay, but black voters, we have the same concerns as all other voters regarding quality of life issues. We have concerns for our children's education. We have concerns for our children's safety. We have concerns about environmental racism. We have concerns about discrimination. We have concerns about the criminal justice. What we ain't concerned about is you trying to sell sneakers to appeal to us, because that's insulting. Because you're now profiling, now trying to basically say that all black people wear sneakers. I'm not a sneaker person. And so I think what an insult. And what we're not interested in is $60 Bibles that say the American Bible. There's no such thing as a Christian as an American Bible. It's God's Bible. God does not just cater to people in America. He caters to everyone worldwide, no matter where you are. That's what we're not into. And what is also an insult?
Wait a minute. I can't let you roll out the clock now. Wait a minute.
What is an insult to black people?
I have 2 minutes left.
Black people like you, because of your indictments, basically trying to call us criminals. That's not what black people are about.
What are you talking about?
You keep saying that that's a black and white issue. Go back. Trump's words were,
there is no black and white issues. It impacts people the same. What are you talking about?
But now you're trying to say it's not a black and white issue.
That's what I've always said. You just don't listen well because you're too busy talking.
Was it not a black and white issue? Was it not a black and white issue when he had the
Rob Bluey,
trying to get the death penalty?
Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Well, Armstrong, I think, listening to JP talk, one thing that stuck out to me is I think the American people are looking for somebody who's authentic and is going to have straight talk and not try to pander to any one particular demographic group or do things like declare on Easter Sunday the Transgender Day of Visibility and all of these other silly things that...
Well, let's be fair now. That transgender law has been in place since March 31st, 2010. Biden did not put that in place. It just happened to fall on Easter weekend.
He didn't have to do the proclamation.
But let's not just say this started when he just continued it.
Sure.
To be fair, I just want the facts. But go ahead.
No, and I think that the American people, I think this is why you see appeal for people like RFK Jr. Because, they say, oh my goodness, I want somebody who is just going to tell me the truth, who's going to stand up to Big Pharma, to, all of the special interests that in Washington, D.C. are looking for a handout. And they're sick and tired of just politicians. I think this is why Donald Trump was so appealing to voters back in 2016, because he offered something different than a lifelong politician like Hillary Clinton.
Tiffany, I'm going to give you the last word. Go ahead.
I think that it's very important for people to show up and vote, because what happens at the White House could ultimately affect what happens in your house. I do think that let's be clear. There are some people, and let me say this. I have an issue when people always talk about Biden's age, because guess what? Trump is only 3 years younger than him. So if you're saying that Biden is old, Trump is old. It's not about the age, it's about the effectiveness, because you can have somebody in there young and that can be ineffective. It's about who is going to get the job done, who is for all American people, not dividing the country, but bringing the country together.
And let me just say this. I pray for our president, but I'm telling you, he's slowly declining. It's just a fact.
He's 80 years old.
You can see it. Well, you admit he is old. And it's obvious that this is taking a toll on him. But anyhow, let me thank all of you, Tiffany, JP, Rob Bluey, for a very lively discussion on a Monday night. Thank you all. We'll be back with Dr. Benjamin S. Carson, who will join us for the remainder of the broadcast. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion. And that is, there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
let's stop the politicking, let's stop the games, let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Dr. Carson, welcome to the broadcast, and thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Carson, what are Americans looking for in a president today? What is the leadership that's necessary for the times that we find ourselves in? Dr. Carson.
Well, first of all, it's important to have somebody who understands the history of the country and who loves the country, who loves the values and principles that are set forth in the country. You also need someone with courage, someone who is willing to march forward without putting their finger in the air and seeing which way the wind is blowing. Those are things that we don't see currently.
So, Dr. Carson, how important is a president who embraces morality and character? How important is that for today's, in our country today?
Well, when you see morality neglected, you begin to see things like cities that are infested by violent criminals who know that they can get away with anything and keep coming back. And you'll see places where people can go into store and take everything they want up to $900 with no consequences. You see violence, random violence to people, and just a lack of respect for one's fellow human beings. We need leadership that helps us to understand that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies, and that everybody has value, and that we need to respect each other. That's what community is all about. And that was something that characterized the early ascent of our country from nowhere to the pinnacle, the sense of community that existed amongst Americans. In many cases, they didn't even speak the same language, but they understood the concept of the common good, and they worked with each other. And if somebody was in need, they didn't ask whether they were a Democrat or a Republican or a Catholic or a Jew. All they knew is that that was their neighbor and they were in need, and they helped them.
Are you concerned in this year's election that a third-party candidate could rise and sway the outcome of this election?
Well, there's nothing in our Constitution that says there can only be two parties. So if a third-party candidate can get traction, they have every right to enter the fray.
So, Dr. Carson, one of the things that you talked about in a piece published in the Baltimore Sun recently was the breakdown of the family. How important is it that we focus on improving and rebuilding the family unit in all communities across this country?
Well, when you look at a nation is composed of states and communities, and those are composed of families. So family is the basic building block. If you have strong families, you'll have strong communities, strong states, and a strong nation. And if you have weak families or non-existent families, you won't have that. Because families are where values are passed on. A child in a traditional nuclear family, all the statistics show this, the leftists and those on the right will both agree, demonstrate that those kids have much better outcomes in terms of financial success, in terms of establishing families, in terms of being contributors and not having a lot of mental issues as well. So we should take a look at the data, and we should try to conform our policies in such a way that we enhance those things that enhance our families and thus our communities and thus our country.
You know, Dr. Carson, everyone knows that you are a world-renowned pediatric neurosurgeon. You know, the first human case of bird flu was recently detected in Texas. Explain the significance of that.
Well, what we've seen, I think everybody knows, with the COVID outbreak, that it always starts small, and it has to be paid careful attention to and has to be contained. And it doesn't matter what kind it is. If we don't have a good immune response to it, it can become very deadly very quickly for a lot of people. I'm hopeful that we have learned some things from the COVID situation that will help us in the case that we have another viral outbreak.
What lessons do you think are critical that we should have learned from COVID?
Well, for one thing, we should have learned how it is spread. It's hard to understand why it took us so long to figure that out. And we also need to understand that truth goes a lot further than fear and control. And a lot of control issues were put out there which made absolutely no sense. And I think a lot of people felt uncomfortable with them, but because our government was saying, this is what you must do, people accepted it. You probably noticed that about 3 or 4 months ago, they were saying that COVID may be coming back and we may have to mask up again and do some other things. And the reception to that news was so cold, they just dropped it, forgot about it.
You know, Dr. Carson, do you think the government pushed this narrative because they wanted to seize control and limit our freedoms, as some people would say? Or is it they just did not know, and a lot of it was they had the best of intentions, but they just did not listen?
It might be a combination of both. They certainly didn't know. That's quite evident. And there was a certain amount of hubris. And, you know, we are the government and we know what's best for you. A little humility would have gone a very long way. There were also policies that made absolutely no sense. For instance, at the FDA, in order to issue an emergency use authorization, EUA, there had to be no other viable treatment. And therefore, with hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and things like that came out, they were soundly put down. And they probably could have saved a lot of lives.
You know, Dr. Carson, you're really involved with restoring the Boy Scouts. You called it the Little Patriots in this country. Talk about why we need to, early on, instill civics and values and virtues and ethics and sacrifice in these young kids, which it seemingly is so lacking in America today.
Well, you know, children develop very rapidly, and they're like little sponges, particularly early on. That's why the Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. It's also the reason that Vladimir Lenin said, give me your children to teach for 4 years, and the seed that I sow will never be uprooted. We have the responsibility to give the children the right information, not information that confuses them and that leads to all kinds of mental problems. such as telling them they're not a boy or a girl, but instead we need to be giving them the facts of the principles that founded this country. And we need to talk about our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot more good than there is bad and ugly, but people take the bad and ugly and try to magnify it and manipulate it into getting young people to believe that they live in an evil country that is the source of problems for everybody else. It's completely the opposite is true. But we have to be much more aggressive in terms of teaching, and that's why at the American Cornerstone we developed the Little Patriots program to give an interactive, internet-based learning program that's free of charge, by the way, because it's underwritten by very patriotic Americans, and it's fun. And we call it the inoculation to indoctrination. And people should try it out. It also is associated with a cartoon program called Star Spangled Adventures. Comes out with a new one each month. It covers a specific topic. And most of the times, the reaction I've seen when the children see these is, "Can I see another one?" They're very excited about them. And we got some top Hollywood talent to produce these, people who were non-woke. And it's been very successful, spreading very rapidly.
You know, I received one in the mail just this week with you and former President Donald Trump as the poster. Listen, this is Your Voice, Your Future. I'm Armstrong Williams, your moderator. Don't go away. We'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Dr. Carson, we're seeing a rise in young people dying from cancer, strokes, and heart attacks. What are we missing here?
Well, there are a lot of drug issues involved in these sudden deaths that we see. And we don't know fully what the cause. People say it's mysterious. Why are so many young people having cardiac issues, for example? There has been some speculation that it may be associated with COVID virus or COVID vaccine. I think time will reveal whether there's any capacity in the thing. But obviously that's the reason that we engage a lot of research and analysis of data to try to give us a better chance of overcoming these diseases. And tremendous progress has been made over the last few decades. There's no question about that. At least in terms of the physical types of diseases. In terms of the mental diseases, not so much.
You know, we're also seeing young people struggling with reproductive issues, Dr. Carson. Why all of a sudden so many young married couples struggle with starting a family?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. You know, the role of the male has been under attack for some time. You know this from your history of working with series on television, making the man look like a doofus and the wife sort of like a superhero. Those are not good images, and it's not true either. But people get those impressions that maybe I'm not needed so much. Maybe I can provide the seed to fertilize the egg, but maybe I'm not really required to stick around. And on the other hand, a lot of our young ladies are given the information that having a baby provides somebody that will love them unconditionally. And they're more concerned about having the baby than establishing the kind of family that will provide the support for that baby. Those are problems. And then some of our federal policies are not necessarily conducive to the development of family structures. So we need to look at all of those things very carefully, because when we look at the data and we see how important the family structure traditionally is, we can't continue to neglect that.
You know, Carson, let me turn to a little politics here. You know, former Vice President Mike Pence is a dear friend, so when you have tremendous respect. He made it clear that under no conditions he will not endorse Donald Trump and his candidacy to seek a second term. You have a very warm relationship with the former president, and you speak with him with such esteem. What is it that you know that former Vice President Mike Pence does not know in your continued embracing former President Trump as to what this country needs today?
Well, I'll tell you why I support former President Trump. Because life was better for people under Trump. We've had the advantage of being able to juxtapose two different political philosophies side by side, Trump administration, Biden administration. I think most people will readily recognize that they had more food on their table, gas in their tank, opportunities, job opportunities, housing opportunities. There wasn't crime throughout their neighborhoods with criminals returning immediately after committing a crime with no punishment. Illegal people weren't being put on the front burners while they were being put on the back burners. Things like that. And then you also have to consider that if we allowed the Department of Justice to be used as a weapon against a political opponent successfully, this country will never be the same again.
Some would say, though, that Joe Biden, no matter what his flaws are, he's decent, he's God-fearing, he's moral. I know morality and character is very important to you. Does not the morality and the character of the former president concerns you as a man of God?
The morality of everybody concerns me, but I'm not the judge. But we do have a responsibility to the people of our nation to make sure that they are safe and that the things that increase the quality of their life are the things that we pay attention to.
So Dr. Carson, you believe that in times like this, you know, the president mentioned something about a bloodbath. I mean, we understand that the context he said that in, but he says it often. Are we to believe that if he doesn't win or whatever, do you think that he's going to go on this revengeful track, the exact revenge on what people consider to be his enemies? Do you think the president has learned, and former president, and he can rise to the occasion? Because Americans need leadership, not divisiveness, not people who are revengeful, and not people who are petty and maligning others. Can this president rise to be better than what we saw the last 4 years and what we're seeing sometimes now when he speaks candidly at his different rallies?
Well, he's already said for him, success will be his revenge. He doesn't have time to go after people. There will be time to try to make sure that our agencies do things that they're supposed to do. and that we have a just system that treats everybody fairly. That is essential if we are to be successful in the future, and I believe he understands that. I do have to question a little bit the question you asked before about the current president being a highly moral person. There's been a lot of evidence to the contrary. And the media has decided that he's a moral character, but the things that he's done don't bear that out.
Do you think Trump is a God-fearing man?
I think he is moving in that direction very rapidly, and that's a good thing. But I don't think it's our job to make judgments about who is good and who is bad.
I get that, Dr. Carson. Tell us, because it's important, because you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know him best. When you say he's moving in that direction, give us examples of the president, because he's moving in that direction. That means he's becoming a better human being. Give us some examples of what gives you encouragement that he's moving in that direction.
Well, you hear him talking frequently now about God and the role of God in our lives. We never used to hear that 8 years ago. So I think that's evidence. And you also see that some of his language isn't nearly as inflammatory as it used to be. I think it takes time for people to change. But, you know, he will not have to respond to everything in a second term because he'll not be able to run again. And I think people will see a pretty significant difference, particularly if he surrounds himself with the right people.
In the less than 45 seconds, what do you think the former president should look for in a vice presidential candidate?
Well, I think it's important to have somebody who wants to heal the country, who recognizes the severe danger that we're in. Benjamin Franklin said, when he was asked, what do we have here, a monarchy or a republic? He said, a republic if you can keep it. The only way we can keep it is to have the kind of people who understand our history, understand our values and principles, and is willing to work very hard for them.
Dr. Carson, thank you so much for joining us and all our guests. For your voice, your future, I'm Armstrong Williams.